There's a voice that can stop you from changing your life, even when nobody else is standing in your way. It doesn't shout. It whispers. Maybe you're not good enough. What if you fail? What if everyone is better than you? Maybe you should wait until you're ready. And sometimes we believe it. That's self-doubt. The strange thing about self-doubt is that it can appear even when you're completely capable of doing something. You can have talent, experience, knowledge, and opportunities, and still question yourself. Think about learning English. Maybe you know exactly what you want to say. The words are somewhere inside your mind, but just before you speak, you think, "What if my grammar is wrong?" So you stay silent. Later, you realize something frustrating. The biggest problem wasn't your English. It was the doubt that stopped you from using it. And this happens far beyond language learning. People don't apply for jobs because they doubt themselves. They don't start businesses. They don't share their ideas. They don't leave unhealthy situations. They don't pursue opportunities, not because someone physically stops them, but because they've already rejected themselves before the world even gets the chance to respond. Hello, my amazing students. My name is Sarah, and today we're going to learn English through a powerful topic that almost everyone struggles with at some point in life: how to stop doubting yourself. And I want to make something clear from the beginning. We're not going to talk about becoming confident every second of every day. That's unrealistic. Even confident people experience uncertainty. The real goal is much more useful: learning how to take action even when doubt is present. Because confidence doesn't always come before action. Very often, confidence comes because of action. Throughout today's episode, we'll explore where self-doubt actually comes from, why comparing yourself to others makes it stronger, how small actions create real confidence, how to change the way you speak to yourself, and finally, how to trust yourself even when you cannot guarantee the outcome. And while exploring these ideas, you'll naturally improve your English listening, expand your vocabulary, hear useful expressions in context, and become more comfortable understanding natural spoken English. We'll explore this topic through 5 lessons. Lesson number 1, understand where self-doubt comes from. Lesson number 2, stop comparing your beginning to someone else's progress. Lesson number 3, build confidence through small actions. Lesson number 4, change the way you talk to yourself. And finally, lesson number 5, trust yourself without needing certainty. So the next time your mind whispers, "What if I can't do it?" try asking a different question. What if I can? Let's begin with lesson number 1. Understand where self-doubt comes from. Before we start, can I ask you one question? A year from now, will your English be better than it is today, or will you still be saying, "I'll start next week"? The truth is, most people don't fail because English is difficult. They fail because they never truly commit to it. That's why, for a limited time, I've reduced the price of the Native Flow English coaching experience to just $5. Not because it's worth only $5, but because I don't want money to be the reason you never start. For less than the price of a coffee, you can begin building a skill that can stay with you for the rest of your life. If you've been waiting for a sign, this is it. Click the link in the description. Join us today, and I'll see you inside. Now, let's begin today's lesson. Lesson number 1. Understand where self-doubt comes from. Imagine you're sitting in a meeting. You have an idea. Actually, you think it's a very good idea. Someone asks, Does anyone have a suggestion? You almost raise your hand. Then a thought appears. Maybe my idea isn't good enough. Another thought follows. What if everyone thinks it's stupid? So you stay quiet. 5 minutes later, someone else suggests almost exactly the same thing. Everyone loves it, and you're sitting there thinking, I was going to say that. This is how self-doubt often works. It doesn't always tell you that you're incapable. Sometimes, it simply creates enough uncertainty to stop you from acting. And if you want to overcome self-doubt, the first step is understanding where it comes from. For many people, self-doubt begins with past experiences. Maybe you tried something before and failed. Maybe someone criticized you. Maybe a teacher made you feel unintelligent. Maybe a parent constantly compared you with someone else. Maybe you were laughed at after making a mistake. The experience ended, but the message stayed. Years later, you may still hear it inside your mind. Imagine someone laughed at your English pronunciation when you were younger. Today, your English may be much better, but whenever you speak in front of people, part of your mind remembers that embarrassment. You think, what if it happens again? So you become nervous. This is important to understand. Sometimes you're not afraid of the present situation. You're afraid of repeating a past experience, and your brain is trying to protect you. That's one reason self-doubt can feel so powerful. It often pretends to be protection. Your mind says, don't try, you might fail. Don't speak, you might embarrass yourself. Don't apply, they might reject you. And yes, avoiding the situation may protect you from temporary discomfort, but it creates another problem. It also protects you from growth. If you never speak English because you're afraid of mistakes, you avoid embarrassment, but you also lose opportunities to become fluent. If you never apply for a better job because you're afraid of rejection, you avoid hearing no, but you also remove every possibility of hearing yes. That's the hidden cost of self-doubt. Another source of doubt is unrealistic expectations. Sometimes we expect ourselves to be good at something immediately. We start learning a new skill and compare our first attempt with someone who has practiced for 10 years. Then we think, I'm terrible at this. But you're not necessarily terrible. You're inexperienced. There's a huge difference. A beginner making mistakes isn't evidence of failure. It's evidence that they're a beginner. Think about a child learning to walk. The child falls repeatedly. Nobody says, look at this terrible walker. We understand that falling is part of learning. Yet as adults, we often expect ourselves to succeed without falling. Another important source of self-doubt is the belief that thoughts are facts. Your mind says, I'm not ready, and you believe it. But that's a thought, not necessarily a fact. Your mind says, everyone will judge me. Again, that's a prediction, not evidence. One useful habit is learning to challenge these thoughts. When your mind says, I can't do this, ask, how do I know? When it says, I'm going to fail, ask, is that certain or am I predicting the future? When it says, I'm not good enough, ask, compared with whom? These questions create distance between you and the doubt. You begin observing your thoughts instead of automatically obeying them. And there's another important truth. Self-doubt doesn't disappear when you become successful. Many successful people still experience it. They simply learn not to let every doubtful thought make their decisions. That's the goal. You don't need to eliminate every insecurity before moving forward. You need to stop treating insecurity like an instruction. You can feel nervous and speak anyway. You can feel uncertain and apply anyway. You can be afraid of failure and begin anyway. Because courage isn't thinking, I know everything will work perfectly. Courage is thinking, I don't know exactly what will happen, but I'm willing to find out. So the next time self-doubt appears, don't immediately fight it. Become curious about it. Ask yourself, where is this thought coming from? Is it based on reality or an old experience? Is it protecting me from real danger or simply protecting me from temporary discomfort? Sometimes, understanding your doubt is enough to weaken its power. Because once you realize that the voice inside your head isn't always telling you the truth, you no longer have to let it decide what you're capable of becoming. Lesson number 2, stop comparing your beginning to someone else's progress. Imagine you decide to start exercising. It's your first week at the gym. You walk inside, look around, and see someone lifting heavy weights with perfect technique. Then you look at yourself. You're struggling with something much lighter. Immediately, your mind says, look at them. I'm so weak. But there's something you don't know. Maybe that person has been training for 7 years. You're comparing your first week with their 7th year. Of course, there's a difference. The problem isn't your ability. The problem is your comparison. And this happens everywhere, especially today. You open social media, and within minutes, you can find someone who appears more successful than you. Someone speaks English more fluently. Someone has a better career. Someone earns more money. Someone has a more successful business. Someone seems more confident. And slowly, without even realizing it, you begin measuring your life against theirs. That's dangerous because comparison usually ignores context. You see someone's result. You don't see their journey. You see the successful business. You don't see the years when nobody bought anything. You see the fluent English speaker. You don't see the thousands of mistakes they made while learning. You see someone's confidence. You don't see the moments when they were terrified. This creates an unfair comparison. You're comparing your behind-the-scenes reality with someone else's finished performance. And then you wonder why you feel inadequate. Here's something worth remembering. Someone being ahead of you doesn't mean you're behind in life. People have different timelines. One person discovers their career at 20, another at 40. One person becomes fluent in English after 2 years. Another needs 5. One person knows exactly what they want from life. Another needs time to discover it. There is no universal schedule that says where you must be at a certain age. And yet, many people create invisible deadlines for themselves. They think, I'm 25. I should already be successful. Everyone my age seems to know what they're doing. But do they really? Often, they're simply showing the parts of their lives that look successful. Another problem with comparison is that there's always someone ahead of you. Imagine earning $2,000 a month. You compare yourself with someone earning $5,000. Eventually, you reach $5,000. Now you notice someone earning $20,000. You reach another goal, and the comparison moves again. If your confidence depends on being better than everyone else, you'll never feel secure. There will always be someone richer, faster, more experienced, more talented, or more successful in some area. So what should you do instead? Change the direction of the comparison. Instead of constantly looking sideways, look backward. Compare yourself with your previous self. Ask, what can I do today that I couldn't do 6 months ago? Maybe 6 months ago, you couldn't understand an English podcast. Now you understand 60%. That's progress. Maybe you used to be terrified of speaking English. Now you can have a 5-minute conversation. That's progress. Maybe you started exercising, reading, saving money, or learning a new skill. Don't ignore your progress simply because someone else is further ahead. Another useful habit is turning comparison into curiosity. Instead of seeing a successful person and thinking, why aren't I as good as them? Ask, what can I learn from them? That's a completely different mindset. Jealousy says, they have something I don't. Curiosity says, they may know something I can learn. Now, the person you were comparing yourself with becomes a source of information. Maybe their success shows you what's possible. Maybe their habits can teach you something. Maybe their journey can save you from making certain mistakes. Other people's success doesn't have to reduce your confidence. It can expand your imagination. And remember, you probably have qualities someone else wishes they had. Maybe you're looking at another person thinking, I wish I had their confidence. While someone is looking at you thinking, I wish I had their discipline. We rarely see ourselves from the outside. That's why comparison gives us such an incomplete picture. So when you catch yourself thinking, I'm not good enough because they're better than me, stop. Remind yourself, I'm not competing with their timeline. Your job isn't to become someone else. Your job is to become better than the person you were yesterday. One word learned, one mistake corrected, one difficult conversation attempted, one small fear faced. That's how real confidence grows, not by proving you're better than everyone around you, but by proving to yourself that you can continue improving. You don't need to be the best person in the room. You simply need to keep becoming a better version of yourself. Because someone else's progress doesn't erase yours. Their chapter 20 doesn't make your chapter 2 meaningless. Keep writing your own story. Lesson number 3. Build confidence through small actions. Many people make the same mistake with confidence. They say, when I become confident, I'll start. When I'm confident, I'll speak English. When I'm confident, I'll apply for that job. When I'm confident, I'll start my business. When I'm confident, I'll introduce myself to new people. But what if confidence doesn't work that way? What if confidence isn't something you need before taking action? What if confidence is something you build by taking action? Imagine someone who wants to learn how to swim. They stand beside the pool every day, reading books about swimming. They watch hundreds of videos. They learn the correct movements. They understand how breathing works, but they never enter the water. After 6 months, will they feel completely confident swimming? Probably not. At some point, they have to get into the water. Real confidence comes from experience, and experience requires action. This is why waiting until you feel completely ready can keep you stuck for years. You may never feel 100% ready. Instead, start smaller. Suppose you're afraid of speaking English. Don't tell yourself, "Tomorrow I'll give a 30-minute speech in English." That's probably too much. Start with something easier. Say one sentence. Ask one question. Order your coffee in English. Send a short voice message. Have a 2-minute conversation. These actions may seem insignificant, but something important happens every time you complete one. Your brain receives evidence. I did it. And confidence is built from evidence. Think of confidence like a bank account. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you make a small deposit. You say, "I'll study for 20 minutes tonight." And you actually study. Deposit. You say, "I'll exercise tomorrow morning." And you do it. Deposit. You say, "Next time I have an idea in a meeting, I'll speak." Your heart starts beating faster, but you raise your hand anyway. Another deposit. Over time, those small deposits create something powerful. Self-trust. And self-trust is much more valuable than temporary motivation. Because when you trust yourself, you don't need to know that everything will go perfectly. You know that whatever happens, you'll deal with it. This is also why repeatedly breaking promises to yourself can damage confidence. Imagine telling yourself every Sunday, "Tomorrow, I'm changing my life." Monday arrives. Nothing changes. Next week, you make the same promise. Again, nothing happens. Eventually, part of your mind stops believing you. That's why smaller promises are often better. Don't promise yourself 3 hours of studying if you realistically have 30 minutes. Don't promise to exercise 7 days a week if 3 days would be sustainable. Choose something small enough that you can actually do it. Then do it consistently. Confidence loves consistency. Another powerful strategy is to keep an evidence list. Self-doubt has a terrible memory. It remembers your embarrassing moments, but conveniently forgets your victories. You make one mistake at work and think about it for 3 days, but you successfully complete 20 other tasks and barely notice. So start collecting evidence. Write down difficult things you've already done. Maybe you moved to a new city, passed an exam, learned another language, survived a difficult period, solved a problem you once thought was impossible, helped someone, finished a project, faced a fear. These experiences matter. When your mind says, "You can't handle this," you can answer, "I've handled difficult things before." That's not empty positive thinking. That's evidence. And here's another important idea. Don't judge your progress only by outcomes. Sometimes courage deserves credit, even when the result isn't what you wanted. Imagine applying for your dream job. You prepare carefully, you attend the interview, you do your best, but another candidate gets the position. Did you fail completely? No. You practiced interviewing. You faced rejection. You discovered what employers ask. And most importantly, you proved that you were willing to try. The next application becomes easier. This is how confidence compounds. Action creates experience. Experience creates evidence. Evidence creates self-trust. And self-trust creates more action. It becomes a positive cycle. The opposite is also true. Avoidance creates fear. Fear creates more avoidance. And eventually, something small begins to feel enormous. The way out isn't usually one giant act of bravery. It's one manageable action, then another, then another. So think about something you're currently doubting yourself about. Don't ask, how can I become completely confident? Ask, what is the smallest action I can take today? Maybe it's sending the email, practicing English for 10 minutes, making the phone call, writing the first paragraph, applying for one opportunity, going to the gym for 20 minutes. The action doesn't need to impress anyone. It simply needs to move you forward. Because confidence isn't built while standing still and thinking about everything that could go wrong. It's built through movement, through experience, through keeping promises to yourself, through discovering again and again that you're more capable than your fear told you. You don't become confident and then take action. Very often, you take action and slowly become confident. Lesson number 4, change the way you talk to yourself. Imagine your best friend makes a mistake. They try something difficult and fail. They look at you and say, I feel terrible. I really thought I could do this. Would you respond by saying, of course you failed. You're useless. You're never going to be good enough. Probably not. You'd probably say something like, hey, you made a mistake. That doesn't mean you're a failure. Or, you can learn from this and try again. We often speak to the people we love with patience, understanding, and encouragement. But when we speak to ourselves, the rules suddenly change. We make one mistake and think, I'm so stupid. We struggle with something and say, I'm terrible at this. Someone rejects us and we think, I'm not good enough. We see someone more successful and immediately tell ourselves, I'll never be like that. If another person spoke to you this way every single day, you probably wouldn't want them in your life. Yet many people allow that voice to live inside their own minds. This inner conversation is called self-talk. And the way you talk to yourself matters because you hear your own voice more than anyone else's. Think about learning English. You try to explain something, but forget a word. If your immediate reaction is, my English is horrible, what happens? You become embarrassed. You speak less. You avoid conversations. And because you practice less, your progress becomes slower. Now imagine a different response. You forget the word and think, okay, I didn't know that word, I'll learn it. Same mistake. Completely different meaning. One response turns the mistake into evidence that you're incapable. The other turns it into information. That's one of the most useful changes you can make. Stop turning temporary problems into permanent identities. There is a huge difference between saying, I failed at this, and saying, I am a failure. One describes an event, the other defines your identity. You can fail an exam without being unintelligent. You can lose a job without being worthless. You can make an embarrassing mistake without being an embarrassing person. You can struggle with English without being bad at languages. Be careful with the labels you give yourself. Your brain listens. Another powerful change is adding one small word to negative thoughts. Yet. I can't speak English confidently. Yet. I don't understand this. Yet. I'm not good at presentations. Yet. That word doesn't magically solve the problem, but it reminds you that your current ability isn't necessarily your final ability. You're describing where you are, not where you must remain. Now, this doesn't mean you should replace every negative thought with unrealistic positivity. Suppose you're nervous about giving a presentation, standing in front of the mirror saying, "I'm the greatest speaker in the world." Probably won't help if you don't believe it. Your mind may immediately respond, "No, you're not." A better approach is realistic encouragement. Say, "I'm nervous, but I've prepared." Or, "I don't need to be perfect. I just need to communicate clearly." Or, "I've handled uncomfortable situations before. I can handle this one too." Those statements are powerful because they're believable. Confidence doesn't require lying to yourself. It requires speaking to yourself fairly. Another habit that strengthens self-doubt is predicting what other people think. You enter a room and think, "Everyone is judging me." You make a small mistake and think, "They probably think I'm stupid." But how do you know? Did they tell you? Usually, no. You're trying to read minds. And strangely, when we imagine what other people think, we often imagine the worst possible version. Here's something worth remembering. Most people are thinking about themselves far more than they're thinking about you. They're worrying about their own appearance, their own mistakes, their own problems. That embarrassing sentence you've been thinking about for 3 days, the other person may have forgotten it 3 minutes later. Another useful practice is speaking to yourself the way you'd speak to someone you genuinely care about, not by making excuses, not by pretending mistakes don't matter, but by combining honesty with compassion. You can say, "That wasn't my best work. What can I improve?" Instead of, "I'm terrible at everything." You can say, "I made the wrong decision. What did it teach me?" Instead of, "I always ruin everything." Notice the difference. One voice attacks your identity, the other helps you grow, and growth requires honesty, but it doesn't require cruelty. Finally, pay attention to repetition. One negative thought may not change much, but repeat it every day for years, and eventually it can become a belief. The same principle works in the other direction. Every time you challenge an unfair thought, every time you acknowledge your progress, every time you replace "I can't" with "I'm learning," you're slowly changing the relationship you have with yourself. You don't need an inner voice that tells you you're perfect. You need one that tells you the truth. Sometimes the truth is, you made a mistake. Sometimes it's, you need more practice. But sometimes, the truth is also, you're doing better than you think. You've already survived difficult things. You're allowed to learn. You're allowed to begin before you're perfect. And perhaps most importantly, one difficult moment doesn't decide who you become, because the person you speak to more than anyone else is yourself. Make sure that voice helps you move forward, instead of convincing you to stay where you are. Lesson number 5. Trust yourself without needing certainty. There is one question that self-doubt loves more than almost any other. But what if it goes wrong? What if I choose the wrong career? What if I start and fail? What if I speak and make a mistake? What if I trust someone and get hurt? What if I make a decision and regret it? These questions feel responsible. They feel like careful thinking, but sometimes they're simply fear asking for something life can never give us. Certainty. Imagine standing at a crossroads. One road leads left, the other leads right. You desperately want someone to tell you which road will create the perfect future. But nobody can. You can gather information, ask for advice, think carefully, look at the risks. But eventually, you have to choose. That's life. And one of the most important steps in overcoming self-doubt is accepting that confidence doesn't mean knowing exactly what will happen. It means trusting yourself to respond to whatever happens. There's a huge difference. A person with self-trust doesn't say, "I know I'll succeed." They say, "I'll do my best, and if something goes wrong, I'll deal with it." That's much stronger, because success is never completely under your control. You can prepare for an interview and still not get the job. You can start a business and discover that your first idea doesn't work. You can practice English for months and still make mistakes during an important conversation. But none of those outcomes automatically means you made a mistake by trying. Sometimes, the attempt itself changes you. You gain experience. You discover what you need to improve. You become more resilient. And you learn something about yourself that you couldn't have learned by staying safe. This is why uncertainty isn't always your enemy. Sometimes, it's the price of possibility. Think about almost every meaningful decision you've made. Did you know exactly how it would turn out? Probably not. The first day at a new school, starting a new job, moving somewhere unfamiliar, meeting someone new, learning English. You entered those experiences without knowing the ending, and yet, many of them helped shape the person you are today. Another reason people struggle to trust themselves is that they believe good decisions always produce good outcomes. But life is more complicated. Imagine you carefully choose a job. The company seems stable. The salary is good. The people seem kind. 6 months later, the company experiences financial problems and closes. Does that mean your original decision was foolish? Not necessarily. You made the best decision you could with the information you had at the time. That's all anyone can do. Self-trust means judging yourself fairly. Instead of saying, "I should have known," ask, "Could I realistically have known?" Sometimes the answer is no, and learning to accept that can remove an enormous amount of unnecessary guilt. Another powerful habit is separating your worth from your results. You are not your latest achievement. You are not your salary. You are not your exam score. You are not the number of people who approve of you. And you are certainly not your latest mistake. Results give you information. They don't determine your value as a human being. This matters because when your identity depends entirely on success, every challenge becomes terrifying. Failure no longer means something didn't work. It means something is wrong with me. And that's when self-doubt becomes much stronger. Instead, learn to say, "This didn't work. What can I learn?" That question keeps you moving. There's another important part of self-trust, making decisions for yourself. Advice is useful. Mentors can help. Friends can offer another perspective. Family may genuinely want the best for you, but eventually, you have to live with your choices. If you constantly need someone else to approve every decision, you slowly teach yourself that your own judgment isn't enough. Start with small decisions. Choose, observe the result, adjust, learn. The more decisions you make, the more you understand yourself. You discover your values, your strengths, your limits, your priorities. Self-trust grows through this process, not because you always choose perfectly, but because you learn that you can correct your direction when necessary. Think about driving somewhere you've never been before. You take a wrong turn. What do? You don't normally stop the car and say, "That's it. I'm terrible at traveling. I'll never go anywhere again." You change direction. Life deserves the same flexibility. A wrong turn doesn't mean the journey is over. Sometimes it even teaches you a better route. And as we finish today's topic, I want you to remember something important. You don't need to become a completely different person before you begin believing in yourself. Look at what you've already survived. Think about the problems you once believed you couldn't handle, the difficult days that eventually passed, the mistakes you learned from, the things that once frightened you, but now feel normal. You've already been building evidence that you can adapt. Self-doubt simply doesn't remind you of that evidence often enough. So remind yourself. The next time your mind says, "What if I fail?" Answer, "Then I'll learn." When it says, "What if I make a mistake?" Answer, "Then I'll correct it." When it says, "What if I'm not ready?" Ask, "What small step can I take anyway?" And when it asks, "What if people judge me?" Remember, their opinions don't have to become your identity. Throughout these 5 lessons, we've discovered that self-doubt often grows from past experiences and fear. We've learned to stop comparing our beginnings with someone else's progress. We've seen that confidence grows through small actions, not endless waiting. We've changed the way we speak to ourselves, and now we've reached perhaps the most important lesson of all. You don't need certainty to trust yourself. You need the willingness to learn, adapt, and continue. Thank you so much for learning with me today. I hope this episode has helped you improve your English. But I also hope it leaves you with a little more courage than you had when you started listening. You don't need to know exactly where your journey will lead. You don't need to have everything figured out. And you definitely don't need to become perfect before taking the next step. You simply need enough courage to take that step. Then another. Because one day you may look back at the person you are today, the person who was worried, uncertain, and doubting themselves, and realize you were capable all along. You just needed to give yourself the chance to discover it.